All right, so let's get to this question that Hunt You Down had with regards to as you are approaching and doing skin, trying to get better and better with it. And the first thing that I will tell you is I very rarely use wash, period. So I want to make sure that I'm honest and upfront about that. When using washes, I typically don't use them as complete area filters. Sometimes, but you typically see like people will be like, okay, so we've base coated now and we've got a little bit of highlight, and then we'll put a wash on here to get the shading back on. Usually if you go through with like a mid-tone, especially for skin, you go through with like a color like this to base your skin with. Well, it's not quite dark enough for your shadows, so you need to find a way to put shadows back on the model, so a wash makes sense. The problem with a wash is that it filters the entire model. So now, and by filter, I mean that it colors everything. So if you use like Reichland Flesh Shade, Reichland Flesh Shade from GW over this color is going to darken this color up. It's going to give you the shadows you want if you do it right, but it's also going to eliminate the mid-tone that you put on there and make it darker. So you're then going to have to highlight back over the top of that. And highlighting over that becomes hard because now you have a different color base. Okay, so Psych, what's going on? I hope I didn't butcher your name too bad. Let's see, I got Reichland Flesh Shade. So here's Reichland Flesh Shade right here. Right, you can see I don't use it very much. It's got all the pigment built up in the bottom. But so Reichland Flesh Shade, when put over the top of this, is going to add this kind of reddish brown to this color. So now your base coat is that blended color. When you then highlight back up off of that, how do you do it? Do you go back and use this color? Because now it can maybe look a little weird as it leaves a very strange contrast between the washed version of the color and the unwashed version. Unfortunately, GW's washes don't blend very well with paint to make other colors. You can do it, but it's not really good because the viscosity and the medium that they use here is not really relevant when trying to mix it with other paints. It's a little stubborn, so it makes it very difficult. So what we normally say is that my whole painting style and what I teach is building from a dark base so that you're not really in a point where you have to put washes on models to get shading back. So I start from a black primer all the time, and then when we're just doing regular flesh, I start from a very dark base, and then we work up to brighter tones as we go. So like on this guy, same exact process that we're doing on the big guy here. We're wet blending all of this base. Now that's not necessary. We don't have to get into the particulars there, but just understand that like I started from basically dark purple on this. And then I start layering my skin tones up until finally, if we look at his face, right, I've started on the face, starting to brighten it up and give it some highlights. Right, we're nowhere near done, but you can see the difference in value. So I've started getting some brightness on the forehead and eyes and cheeks and things like that. And eventually, some stage of this will be evident on all of the muscles, right? We won't brighten them all because some of them in the shadows, like back here and whatever, right? But this model has no wash and will never really need wash because I've created it from the darkness and layered up to my brightness, right? And so I'll get to my skin tone like on this face, and I'll still maintain the shadows I need along the temple and under the cheeks and chin and all those areas without ever having to use a wash. Now, is that easier or harder? It's harder. It's much harder to do this, especially when doing like a whole army. For just doing one figure, I don't find that this is very hard at all. But if I were doing a Imperial Guard regiment and I needed a ton of catechins done, and so I got a lot of bare muscle going on, or Viking army for Kings of War, and they're all bare chested like this guy, and so now I've got to paint tons and tons of flesh and tons of muscle, then what I would still do is go through and paint it like this. Imagine painting this face from dark base coat to bright highlight and then wash over the top of it if I want to get my color to be more realistic. So I might highlight this guy's skin up brighter than skin would normally go. Like I might highlight it up to, say, this color highlight, right? Olive flesh. So this color highlight is really, really bright and probably doesn't need to live on this color skin if I'm going for more tanned flesh, right? But if I highlight up real bright and then I wash over the top of it with the Reichland Flesh Shade, what happens is that the brightest areas darken up a bit, which is what we want because they didn't need to be that bright, but they also get colored by the flesh shade. So now the flesh shade going all over everything doesn't pose as big of a problem as it normally does when you just do a base coat, maybe one dry brush, and then wash. Because then the whole model gets knocked down so dark that you have to fight to bring your highlights back on and make it look good. Whereas if you highlight the model up brighter than you really want it and then do the wash, then it drags those highlights down to where you really need them, plus adding the shade, plus giving you the skin tone you want. And then you can do a whole army very quick. So in general, what we're talking about is, let's see if I have a model here. Let's imagine, it would be even better if I had like a model with some skin that we could put a wash over real quick. I probably don't. I don't just have a model sitting here that's ready to go like that, unfortunately. Boop, boop, be doop. What could we do real quick? Oh, how about that guy? Don't we have a guy? We have a hate model that I think all we did was like paint a face on him, right? Thank you for that follow. Oh, here he is. Yeah, we have another hate model. This guy didn't even prime. We were just using it as a way to show painting eyes, right? So it's already, the flesh is kind of done the way I'm talking about. And forgive this. This is just a demo model. But let's do this. Let's take, like right now, I've got tan flesh on there and a little bit of shadow flesh in the shadows, right? So let's go through and add some of the olive flesh, which would be way too bright of a highlight on this guy's face, right? So let's add some of this to get my point across. And never, or I should say always, feel comfortable asking questions on the stream. That's really what we're here for, not only to showcase our products, but just to have fun painting. And if you've got something that you may be getting hung up with your own hobby, something that you're trying that you're not having success with, thank you so much for the follows. Milk Maiden, great name. Is that the Iron Milk Maiden? That would be the only thing that would make that better. Not to put words in your mouth or force you to change your name, but I'm just saying. So let's go through here, and I'll just drag in. I got totally the wrong brush for doing this. But we'll make it work. Again, thank you guys and gals so much for all of the follows. Welcome. Welcome. All right, so basically just going in here and kind of spot highlighting where I know I would have brighter skin tones, but doing it with a color that isn't very indicative of the way I want this guy's flesh to look, right? I'm intentionally over brightening these areas because I know I'm going to use a wash, right? So that's pretty good. Let's do a little bit down on this side of his cheek just to get a little bit of a glow going. I'll do a little bit on his lip too, okay? So now we've brightened his face up pretty much way too bright for the skin tone we were going for, right? But we know that the idea, at least, was that we were going to use a little bit of a finger smudge there to get an in-between highlight on that part of his chin, right? So we know that the idea was that we're going to be doing a wash in the end. So you can imagine if this guy were some, those catechins that you were doing a lot of, you could go through and paint, basically this is our shadow flesh as a base coat, right? Which again isn't dark enough for all the shadows, but it's a good dark color. Put that on, then do tan flesh over the top of that, right? As a good kind of first highlight, and then do olive flesh over the top of that, which is a really bright highlight that makes your skin, in some cases, this is a good skin color, but for this guy, if you want tan, outdoor, barbarian, probably not a good color. So those three colors right there, boom. But you paint all three. You base coat, you highlight, and then final highlight with these. Do all of that, and you can do it dry brushing however you want, as far as whatever technique you use is kind of irrelevant. Right? Then we take, say, a Reichland flesh shade over the top of these, right? And hopefully this is dry enough to do this. Right? And now, if I take the Reichland flesh shade and just treat it like an all-over pass of a wash, the first thing you'll notice is that it knocks those highlights down, gives us the shading that we want so much out of a wash, but now we're damn near done, right? I don't have to worry on a face like this now how to bring my highlights back up and how to mix those colors. Because I highlighted too bright and then put the wash on there that knocks that brightness back down, if you plan that right, you get it right where you want it. So by using those three colors and putting like the flesh shade over that, boom, you can see instantaneously, this guy's ready for the table. I mean, it needs to dry, right? But now I don't have to go back and highlight anything because I already did it. And I let the wash then filter over the top and drag all those down to being the right tone and shade that I want, right? And so as long as this gives me the darkness that I want, boom, easy. But a lot of people miss that step. They don't highlight bright enough before doing their wash, and then that catches you in that weird state where now you're trying to highlight over the top of a filtered skin tone, and it's hard to match that coloring because you don't have your wash as a mixer, right? So in general, I would say this is your best bet for washing over flesh because you'll get all that, like around the nostril, you'll see we got the shading we want in the eye socket and everything. But the highlight on the nose and the forehead that we had that was bright, it's that color that was on my fingernail, right? It was this. And all of a sudden, bam, it's knocked down and looks like skin tone. So this would just, I mean, if you wanted to paint a little pink on his lip or something, and you're done, right? This could be that easy, so. Hopefully that helps. Does that help answer the question? That's how I would do washes, right? And you can see that at the end of the day, you wind up getting not too dissimilar of a effect than just layering up like I normally do. The layering just puts you in control of all the transitions in color, whereas a wash is kind of uncontrollable. It goes where it wants to do and does its thing, but yeah.